I was becoming conscious and aware of who I was and the oppressive conditions that I was living under. I quickly came to see that this was something that I was interested in, and something that was right, and something that I could dedicate myself to. I saw that we could really change conditions for black people and conditions in the black community, and at that time I had 3 sons, and I really wanted to do that. I didn't want my sons to grow up in the world that I grew up in.
My interest in the Black Panther Party was served by serving breakfast at the Hunters Point breakfast program. And on occasion, I did sell newspapers on Fillmore. I never joined the party as a quote-unquote member, but always supported its program and did work as much as I could in the Breakfast for Children.
We would go out and try to get those needs met, and those needs were basic human rights, basic land, food, housing, clothing, education, and justice, and some peace within the community.
The police in our communities were like an occupying force there to protect the property of outside interests, not to serve and protect the people in the community. The Black Panther Party took up the challenge and started patrolling the police to ensure that people understood their constitutional rights, just their rights in general, and to make sure that people weren't being brutalized by the police.
When I joined the Black Panther Party in 1968, my first experience with CointelPro was the assassination of Al Prentice Bunchy Carter and John Huggins in Los Angeles. I never carried a gun before until Bunchy Carter and John Savage and Sylvester Bell, until they got killed. I never carried a gun. I didn't have no use for a gun. I was functioning in the community. I was working free breakfast programs. I was working clothing drives, you know, organizations with people in the community and the church. I need no gun.
The involvement with the Panther Party brought me in direct conflict with Hoover and his program, CointelPro, counterintelligence program that was designed to destroy dissent in this country. It was specifically geared toward preventing the rise of what he called a black messiah.
When CointelPro was at its height, which is in the 60s and very, very early 70s, one of the main focuses was on the Black Panther Party. And in fact, J. Edgar Hoover, who masterminded CointelPro, labeled the Black Panther Party as the #1 threat to national security in the United States. So at that time, Hoover authorized all kinds of illegal activity against the Black Panther Party.
Fred Hampton he was assassinated by CointelPro in Chicago, drugged, set up, murdered while he was asleep, actually unconscious in his bed.
CointelPro caused so much dissension in the community. The fallout from this is still being felt today. There were people who were natural associates who were made enemies by letters and phone calls, while the FBI agents and people who planned this laughed in the background.
They were law violators, and they all were law enforcement agents.
In 1973, 13 alleged members of the Black Panther Party were arrested in New Orleans. Various detectives from police departments in other parts of the country immediately flew to New Orleans to participate in the interrogation of some of the arrestees.
We were taken to the New Orleans City Police Department, where we were stripped of all clothing, down to underwear. I was thrown in a cell, a holding cell.
I was put in a jail cell and questioned by different jurisdictions of San Francisco, New York, New Orleans, and Los Angeles, California.
Inside that holding cell, there was Reuben Scott was there, and he was really afraid. He was trembling, he was scared, and I could tell he's been beaten on.
I was in New Orleans when my associates were arrested, John Bowman, Reuben Scott, and Harold Taylor. And it was just by coincidence that I wasn't arrested. I found out later that they had been tortured by the New Orleans police.
I was in there for maybe 5 minutes and the door opened. 3 police officers in New Orleans came in, dragged me up by my heels, took me to a chair where they handcuffed me to the chair and handcuffed my ankles, my feet to the bottom part of the chair. Without asking me any questions, they commenced beating me. They beat me, they punched me, they kicked me, they spit on me. They called me a lot of vile names. And then they told me that they was going to kill me if I didn't cooperate with them.
The New Orleans Police Department would come into the room where a hot blanket would be taken from the bucket, dripping hot and wet, placed over my head, held there for, I can't say whether it was minutes or seconds. It felt like forever.
They came out with a plastic bag, put it over my head, and they started beating me with the bag over my head. About the time I was about to lose consciousness, about to pass out, they'd snatch the bag off, and while I'm trying to catch my breath, they would start beating me again. So I asked them, I said, well, what do you want? You know, and they just continued on with it. They didn't ask me any more questions. They didn't ask any questions, really.
2 of the detectives who came from San Francisco were named Frank McCoy and Ed Erdelatz. They had been investigating a police homicide that had occurred in 1971.
Then they came out with this cattle prod. I knew what it was because being off of a farm when I was a kid, my family used to go to Louisiana every year to work the little family farm. And my uncles, they had we had some cows, and they used cattle prods to move those cows up chutes and stuff like that. So I seen that and I knew what it was.
The cattle prod was placed on my genitals, placed in my asshole, placed under my feet, placed under my arms.
Down in my private parts, under my neck, behind my ears, down my back. I think I passed out one time. They woke me back up, and they was taking me to another room. 2 detectives had me by one arm, by each arm, and a detective came out of nowhere, and he just cold cocked me and he knocked me straight out. I was unconscious.
Another instrument that was used during the questioning was a ledger log book, and this ledger log book was used to hit me upside my head at times when I was not giving the right answers that was script for me.
They took me into a holding cell. They threw water on me. I was soaking wet, it was cold. Pulled me out of there, maybe about 6 or 7 in the morning, and told me they had somebody they wanted me to talk to, and I'd better cooperate, and if I didn't, I was going to get more of the same. So they put me in there. There was 2 detectives from San Francisco. I later found out it was McCoy and Erdelatz. They started asking me questions, and they told me they had a script. I'm sure I saw a recorder there too. And they was reading to me about what they said took place in San Francisco. I told them I had no knowledge of it.
When I did not answer the questions in the way that they wanted them to be answered, this is when the instruments that I named before would be used. Primarily by the New Orleans Police Department. They were the main physical aggressors